It's October 30th, 2003. We're at the Chemung County Historical Society in Elmira, New York. The person I'm interviewing is Robert Breitung. Date of birth is 12/21/29. Robert lives at 71 Retirement Drive, Portsmouth, New York. My name is Tom Malley. I'm a volunteer at the Veterans Oral History Project. Robert was in the U.S. Navy from 1948 to 1952. Achieved the rank of Pipe Fitter 3rd Class and served in the Korean Theater. Bob, why did you join the Navy?
Like I was saying before, a very good friend of mine, his name was Hank Frey. For weeks and weeks on, he kept asking me to join the Navy Reserves in Whitestone, New York. And he painted a really pretty picture, like, oh boy, we get paid for this. We go to meetings every Tuesday night, we get uniforms, and again, we get paid for this. And that also, it was located right on Long Island Sound by the Whitestone Bridge. And they had a small, it was a patrol craft, about 125 feet. And he said, boy, we go out on weekends, up and down, the Sound. And come the summertime, we go to 2-week cruises. We were going to have a lot of fun. So after about a month or so, I said, okay, Hank, come on, let's go down. And we joined, all right? And it was fine, and all what he said was true. We went on weekend little jaunts up and down the Long Island Sound, and the first summer we went down to the Bahamas on a 2-week cruise, and boy, it was a wonderful time. And then what happened was in 1950, Korea came, and we were the first ones, one of the first ones called into action. And what it was at that time, not knowing about it, that MacArthur, who was in commanding of the armies, wanted to make this invasion in Inchon because the North Koreans was putting the army and the Marines down south with their backs against the water in Busan, Korea. And what happened was, well, Henry got his notice and I got my notice the same day. We reported to the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and we went through there like a whiz bang because we had our uniforms, all we needed to be medical, checked out, and we were on our way. We were about the Brooklyn Navy Yard for about 5-6 days, and Henry and I, we split. I got on a train, a super chief, going to California, and in 3 days I was in Treasure Island. I was there for about a week, and then I was on a transport over to Japan, and that's where I got my ship. It was an LST 898, and LST is an amphibious ship, which stands for a landing ship tank. We took on Marines, and we circled around from Japan to Busan. We picked up more Marines, a lot of supplies, trucks, tanks, jeeps, and everything. And we came around the west side of Korea up to Inchon, and September 15th was the Inchon invasion. Okay? It wasn't a severe type of invasion like if you look at or hear stories like Normandy. You have to understand one thing. The Korean War was like 90% of a land battle, and the rest was planes. The Navy never really had any naval battles like in World War II, where you had kamikazes, you had submarines, the Japanese Navy, and even in the Europe campaign, you had submarines, and the Germans had battleships and planes, so you were constantly under pressure during the war. The Korean War was a little bit different, or maybe much more different, because most of my duties were when I was a pipe fitter, but the ship's duty was, excuse me, was picking up troops at one harbor, excuse me, and bringing troops and supplies into another harbor, okay? Making sure that the North Koreans weren't going to come back and surprise us. It was like end runs. Our biggest fear, and we didn't realize at first, was mines. A lot of these harbors had mines in them. And it was surprising because, the war was really into it that long, and again, that the Koreans didn't have a navy, and we don't know who. We're assuming the Russians or somebody gave them the information, the knowledge, and the equipment to lay these mines. And we found out on some of these harbors that we ended up in, we literally went through minefields and never knew it until one LST blew up and we found out there was mines. So every time we came, back then, dropping troops off and supplies at various parts of Korea, coming into the harbor, we always had 2 or 3 lookouts up at the bow for mines, and all the guns up forward, the 20s and the 30s and the 40 millimeters, they were always armed in case anything that looked like a mine was shot at, and sometimes there were mines, and we were lucky, and we never hit one, We took, I think the roughest thing that we ever saw was in 1950, was they called them the Chosen Frozen. I don't know if you ever heard of them, but if you ever talked to a Marine that was in the 1st Division that was there, you're in for a story of a lifetime. I don't know who dropped them off, but they made a march up to the Chosen Reservoir, which was well up in the North Korean. And it was never got so cold. It was so cold. Actually, it was the best to stand still about 5 minutes. The wind, the temperature could be 30, 35 below zero. You would get a wind out of China from Manchuria that bring it down to 60, 70 miles an hour. And the Marines always had a motto that never leave left behind. This is the first time in hundreds of years that they haven't leave their money behind. You went to bed, you know you're going to wake up. And there was about, from what I gathered, about 12,000 Marines compared to 60,000 North Koreans who had them absolutely surrounded. And they fell into a trap. And our job was to wait at Hang Nam, and it was marching down to Hang Nam, and we was going to pull them out. And they had the Marines battled in, and every time in front of it there was a bridge of any sort of going over rivers, the North Koreans would blow them up, and the Army's engineers had to make temporary bridges to get them out. This happened, let me see, Thanksgiving. They ate like kings, and after the day after Thanksgiving it started. And by the time I got down to Hang Nam, you never saw anything like this in your life. We took our Marines that were just literally wiped out, half frozen. We took their dead because what they wanted to take. And we took some civilians, and the dead had to be taken out to the hospital ship Hope because they were on a tank deck, stuck like cordwood. I'm telling you, it was the most horrible thing you ever could see. And they were starting to decompose, so we had to get rid of them. We had a nice write-up about the ship and what it did. We was the last ship to leave the beach. An LST works like when it hits the beach, it usually at low tide. And just before, a couple hundred yards before it hits the beach, you gotta realize they're a flat bottom. Had a huge, huge anchor at the stern of the ship. And at a certain time, they would drop this anchor and it would dig in, and when the ship would go forward, it would hit the beach, the bow doors would open up, and trucks, men, and everybody would run out. Well, at Hang Nam, it was just the opposite. We hit the beach basically sort of like a high tide going into a low tide. And we took civilians, we took all the Marines, we took everything that we could. And with all this weight and the tide going out, we couldn't get off the beach. We were stuck. And you could literally see the North Koreans coming down. Okay? And I think the biggest thing that helped us was the fact that they didn't have like cannons or mortars. It was basically small arms, You would hear a ping now and then. But the biggest lifesaver of all was, in the vicinity was a seagoing tug. And every time, well, what would you do? You put the engine in reverse and start a winch in the back, and that would pull you towards the anchor, all right? Well, the bottom was more muddy-ish than sand, and instead of we being pulled to the anchor, we were pulling the anchor towards us, and we were hung up on the beach. We got this seagoing tug, and between us trying to get off with our power and the seagoing tug pulling, we made it, but we were the last beach, and the last ship off the beach, and it was close. And I tell you, at the age of 18, 19, boy, you can crack your pants. That was about the roughest thing we had. We also had the same problem with Wonsan. We delivered and eventually took people off there, but that Hang Nam was unbelievable, unbelievable. I think that was the worst of it all, really.
When you were in the reserve first,
Yes.
did you go through traditional basic training of any kind?
No, it was, I was so Navy ignorant, it was unbelievable. We had meetings every Tuesday night. We'd get there about an hour before time, and we'd be outside playing soccer or softball, or, you know, in uniform, and then we'd have a meeting, and I was at the various classes, actually. I was like in the engine room type of class, diesel engines. And they had a motor mech, that's what they used to call diesel people. You know, he was a chief, and he would talk about this, the engines and blah, blah, blah. And they would go into a lot of damage control, like when General Corps assigned you had a station, and how do you treat certain fire. It was interesting, really, you know, but we were there for fun, you know. And nobody took it really that serious, but you did learn certain things. So, and they looked, and your background, and like in high school, they went over that, and I found out I went to a vocational high school, and I took a machine shop for 2 years and plumbing for 2 years. So, well, I had a background as a pipe fitter or a mechanic, so they grabbed me fast, you know. In fact, the first day I got on the ship, it was about 4 in the afternoon, and I tell you, I never knew what an LST would look like or what it stood for, but I kept saying, no, this is not the Navy, because, you know, you see destroyers, carriers, and battleships, and aircraft carriers. I said, what the hell is this thing, you know? I got aboard it, and the exec officer and I sat down, you know, you sign me a bunk, you sign me a locker, a quick tour around the ship, and he says, okay, he says, now, look at his watch, it's about 5 o'clock, he said, get on the chow line, you're going to eat first, and I'll tell you why. He brought to me, so I had something, and reported to him, he took me down to the tank deck. And the tank deck, well, the LST is about 60 foot wide, and the tank deck is about maybe 50, 48 feet wide, but there's compartments as you walk along the tank deck. One is like the pipe fitter's compartment, that was his, you know, supply room where he worked out of. There was an electrician, you know, that's where they worked out of. And the next compartment we came to was the laundry room. They had a washer and a dryer, but it was never hooked up. And that was my first job, getting the dungarees, get in there, get this thing working. So about 9 o'clock at night, I had everything working. And he says, take 2 days, take a day off, you earned it, you know. Because they were washing, just throwing clothes on a rope overboard, you know, and soaking them in salt water. So that's how I got to know a lot of good guys over there, because they were glad to see me, you know. But that was my first assignment, get the wash and dry working, you know.
Did you get any rank before?
I was like a seaman, you know. That was it. But I made my rank actually in Korea, you know.
So before, I guess the only thing I'm trying to get at carefully is, what was the difference in your relationship with these people who went through Navy basic training and you who kind of finessed it?
Well, I belong to this organization. It's the New York State Amphibious Association. We have about 230 men, you know, we lose them every day. And I hear stories, and these are all, I'm a young guy, believe me, at 73. I'm looking at, or talking to people at like 78, 90, 81, who were basically not drafted, but went into the Navy in World War II, and they all went to like Samson. Okay, Samson wasn't a big, strong guy, but you know. And they got all that training in boot camp. I never went to boot camp.
Yeah,
that Navy Reserve was my boot camp, you know.
Yeah. All right. So what, on the ship, were you the only pipe fitter?
There was a fellow, when I came on, I was like a seaman, first class, all right. And my boss, he was a tin knocker, first class, okay. Very nice guy, he was my boss, but he knew everything about, he actually was a deep sea diver, which he came in handy at one time. And he also knew plumbing. He was an all-around type of guy, but he was a tin knocker by rate. And he would give me my assignments. He taught me how to weld, how to use a torch to cut, you know. And it was very helpful. He had me along. We got along very good. And when a test was coming up, he gave me a book to read on pipe fitting, you know, what the Navy asked for. And he more or less trained me. He gave me the, you know, I took the test. No cheating. I sat down at the mess hall table. I got the test in front of me, and he said, okay, Mark, time. He walked away and left me. Came back later on. I was done, and 3 weeks later, he ended my stripes.
So what was your rank versus an entry rank? I mean, how many places up the ladder did you get?
Well, I would be like a sergeant.
A sergeant?
Okay, not tons. But you get like sergeant, master sergeant, and all grades of sergeant, you know.
So usually it's about what you get in 4 years.
Yeah. And getting back to my buddy Hank Schrade, and he was shipped to Virginia, Norfolk, Virginia, stayed there 2 years, and never left the States, and on one pass, like a 30-day weekend, he got married. When I come home, he was married, his wife was pregnant, and I said, my God, you're the guy that talked me into this, and you never left the States. You know, that was the joke of the lifetime, I guess. Really.
Did you stay in touch with him after you got out of the service?
Well, not really. Well, yeah, to an extent. You know, once you're married, blah, 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 blah. You know, got that old guy, that son, that old guy is, you know,
Wedding bells are very good.
the old guy of mine, yeah. But 2 other really good friends of mine. One was a Marine, Jack Riley, and the other one, Joe Vedder. He was in the Army, and myself. We still keep in touch. In fact, one guy, he was a carton full of, like when you got to Liberty, you went to like an enlisted men's club, you know. But he was an electrician for clerks, so he was allowed to go to the petty officer club. That's an upgrade, you know. So he used to lend me his jersey, his blacks. Well, I go in with him, you know. Oh, 2 electricians trade class, you know. And we do our drinking and go hours in there. But when I made mine, I said, here's your old jersey back. I don't need my... Well, now I got discharged in 52. This compartment on the tank that was right next to mine, sometimes we worked together. You know, if he needed something mounted, I would weld it on, or something getting down, you know. And we got along like 2 peas in a pod. And to this day, he calls me every other month. I call him every other month.
That's great.
After 50 years, 51 years, we still keep in touch.
That's great.
Yeah. And when I go to the last reunions, I can show you the pictures that, well, in fact, it was mostly because of my son-in-law who worked for Corning. He knew how to fly, all right? And he built up a big stack of frequent flyer miles. And for $50, I was able to fly out to the state of Washington, where I lived and where the reunion was, you know. Right now, it's kind of hard financial-wise, you know. Yeah. And he don't fly anymore, so, you know. But we keep, on our, my turn, I call up, you know.
That's great.
Yeah.
Were you left California in 1948?
I left, I guess it was, you mean, to go to Korea? Yeah.
Were you actually in the Korean theater for all 4 years?
Oh, no. Like I said, it was like 2 years in Korea, and about 1.5 years, 2 years with the reservists. Now what happened after, put about 1.5 years, close to 2 years in Korea. From Korea, we went to Japan. We wanted to drive that to get patched up. And from there, we went to San Diego. I got to San Diego, and I was supposed to get discharged in 3 days. So for 3 days, I ran around with all kinds of paperwork, pushing my discharge. You know, how to go to the dentist, how to go here, how to go here.
You were on active duty for 4 years?
Well, I don't know if you'd call it active duty was Korea, basically. That was a 24-hour day.
Yeah.
You know, but
you were in active duty in the Navy for 4 years, or?
Well, 2 years I did 3 years, but I don't know if you call the reservist or the armed guard active duty.
Yeah.
Well, I guess so then.
Yeah. What was the most kind of interesting assignment you had as far as keeping the ship afloat with you were, or that? I mean, when were you having to be the most ingenious?
The most wanted?
The most wanted, the most innovative?
I think it was at the old stuff to look the same. I think it was Wonsan. We were taking on, we dropped off troops and supplies, and it was, late at night, it was dark, somewhere around 7:30, 8 o'clock. and the LST next to us was pulling out. We still was, getting ready to pull out. And as it pulled out, it swung, and its anchor, the flukes of the anchor hit the side of our ship, went through the side, and ripped up all the piping. And I was up 24 hours trying to get things back to normal,
What piping specific?
Well, it was like hot water, cold water, yeah, it didn't hit any fuel lines, thank God for that.
You didn't take out water.
Yeah, but we were losing like fresh water, and we were never in a situation of like harm's way of taking in water and maybe going down.
Yeah.
Thank God for that. And like I said before, we didn't have to worry about airplanes bombing us. We didn't have to worry about submarines torpedoing us or some big cruiser or battleship blowing us out of the water. It was altogether different,
Well, did you spend any time at all on other kinds of ships?
No, that was the only one, really. So I spent 3 days on an LSD because we had to go over and get mail and supplies.
Yeah.
That was the only thing.
What did you do on leave? Did you ever get leave while you were in?
Yeah, when we went into Kobe for repairs, we patched up. We had, I guess about a month we had to leave just.
Was that your first leave in the Navy?
My first leave, actually, my first time of finding out what the other side of the world looked like is when I got to Japan to get to the ship. I was in Japan about a week, and they wanted to get rid of us when they didn't need us. They had a port and starboard watches and port and starboard. And yeah, it was quite interesting.
What did you do on leave? I mean, to the extent you were a part of it.
Well, I was just going to say, at 18, 19, you don't want this on tape. I tell you the truth, some people don't believe it. I went to a park and took pictures. But no, there was the bar scene and the carousing, buying souvenirs, and the funniest thing was, basically, New Year, the streets were just shops. They would sell you everything, And they were the Japanese at that time were very crafted, but they imitated a lot of our stuff, But you could buy cigarette lighters and thermometers and fans and dishes. In fact, I bought a set of Noritake bone china, which is probably one of the nicest ones you can get. I forgot what I paid for it. I paid for shipping and delivery. My mother never got it. God knows where that ended up, That was probably the biggest joke at supper time. I sold this guy something and he ain't going to get it. But it was, wow. This is unbelievable,
Yeah.
After the girls were all over the place, But like I say, it was kind of a bar. In fact, in Kobe, the pictures, there's a picture of the outside. For some reason, we got to know this one family very well, I mean, not, fooling around or, And they would allow us to go in the back of the bar, which was their, home, And the shore patrol would come in, and they couldn't come back there. They could go up to the bar, but no further. And we would just sit there and have a lot of fun with the girls and that. It was great. It was very interesting. Very educational, put it for 18, 19 years old. Yeah, you could go in like a boy, come out like a man. Yeah, really. But we went to Tokyo on a weekend. We went, we did, tourists, Actually, I would say for myself and most of the majority of the guys that were in any service, if it wasn't for the war, they probably would have never left the States. Really. I went to Hawaii, Japan, Korea. I never had the opportunity, never will have the opportunity to go to these places.
Did you ever go back after the war to any of the places?
No, I couldn't. No.
Did you ever have a desire to do that?
No, not really. I think, believe it or not, sometimes when you even dream about it, after 50 years, certain things come back. It's amazing. I dreamt sometimes I'm back in the service in the Navy again, really. I wake up, not in a cold sweat. I said, thank God it was a dream, The other time I would go back if I meet some of the old cronies. I mean, very, very nice friends.
How did you keep in touch with your family while you were in the service?
Well, just my mother and father. I wasn't married. And my aunts and uncles, I always got the time to either start, mostly on engine room watch or generator watch. I would sit down.
What's engine room watch?
Well, when you're underway, you have to take certain readings every hour.
Oh, really?
For pressures, and this and that, fuel consumption, and how many RPMs, and then you had to stand by the announcer, which was telegraph between the bridge and the engine room. And that was, you know, well, you were kept pretty busy there, and you're always wiping something down, you know, and then I'd be clean. When you came down to the engine room, you were handed a rag, start there, you know, and then you had a big chart, you had to go around. It took about 15, 16 readings, you know. But the generator watch was just making sure the generators would work to give the ship electricity, and that was it, you know, so that's when I started most of my writing, you know. I met this girl. I would write her a couple of times a week, and she ended up being my wife. And my aunts and uncles, you know, I would write, like, I had two aunts that lived in the same house, and I'd say, and Emily, you're done good as the Aunt Francis. Yeah, that's the one, really? Yeah. You know, it was a two-family house, apartment house, and I said, when you're done with this, please pass it down to Aunt Mary or Aunt Mary.
Did they keep any of the stuff that you sent, or did you keep copies of letters?
No, you don't think of those things, really. No. I didn't get too much letter from my aunts and uncles. I would write mostly my mother and father, and I would get a lot of mail back from them and packages and things like that.
Did you ever get home on leave, or were you away?
Yes, I got home on leave once. Yes.
How was that? How did you feel about that experience?
It's funny when you change your life so, you know. I couldn't sit still, the truth of it, you know. And this one of my friends, Joe Vedder and I, we used to hang out in a bar called Jack Shay's, and they had a game called shuffleboard. Shuffleboard in them days that was big. And we got to the point where we was, you know, always challenging somebody, and you would hold the shuffleboard king position until somebody eliminated you. And we held it for probably one of the longest times. And you go up there, and nothing's the same. Your other friends are in the Army. Joe Vedder was in the Army in Korea. Jack Riley was in the Marines. He was in Korea, you know. Kenny Joe went into the paratroopers. I was in the Navy, you know. Henry was in the Navy in Virginia. Almost, yeah. You know, so we got home in a way you couldn't wait to get back, but it's fun. It's funny feeling, you know.
How many people were on the ship?
We had about, I'd say about 5 officers and about 125 crew.
Did you stay with the same crew during the whole time over there?
Yeah, and if you look at the pictures, you would never think he was in the Navy, because we wore Marine clothes on the clothes.
Yeah.
The captain, you know, some of these ships like an aircraft carrier, battleship or cruiser, big ship, really, I'm talking Navy ships. You go down the engine room in your whites, you know. We went down the engine room with dungarees and U.S. Army or Marines. We never wore.
Was it kind of an informal relationship between officers and enlisted?
No, well, you treated your officers with respect.
Yeah.
But they were, you know, down on you.
Yeah. Did you have a regular regimen of activities, or did you have to get up at 5 and?
Well, you had your watches.
Yeah. But you didn't have a kind of an Army scenario as far as.
No. You had to get up at a certain time.
Yeah.
Then the first thing would be sick call. All right. Then after sick call, you would have breakfast, and then you went on your daily. Then you mustered another time deck, and from there you went on your daily.
Did they have a chaplain?
No. Well, it was Christmas. We had a chaplain. He would go from ship to ship, and he would hear confessions, and we have a mass on the tank deck.
Yeah. Same ship for the whole time, or did you change?
No, I was on the same ship all the time.
What happened to the ship after you?
I don't know. According to here, it tells you the history of it and where it went. I think it went to Taiwan or somewhere. Probably a banana boat, if it's still afloat. It's an experience. Now, this girl that I was writing to, Gloria, became my wife. I got home, I started to date her. And she was going out with this guy, Jack Riley, who was a Marine, and she didn't care for him, and she started going out with me. And I remember, like, you know, it was strange. I really not got into the dating scene before going into the service, you know, not at 16, 17, and 18. And now I went through this whole change of life, basically, and now I'm with a girl. I really didn't know how to act too well, you know, but We used to go over to 42nd Street a lot, taking the Broadway shows, Louis Prima and Healy Smith, you know. You mentioned these people today, they look at you like you had two heads.
I probably still have records.
Yeah, and when I was on leave, I dated her, and when I got discharged, I continued dating. We got married.
She from the same school that you?
No. I lived in a place called Glendale. She lived in Brooklyn on Knickerbocker Avenue, you know. Now, we come from two different backgrounds. I mean, she was Catholic, so was I. But, no, I mean, her lifestyle was different than mine, you know.
How did you meet her?
I met her at a picnic. This friend, Jack Riley, who was in the Marines, and I still talk to him, he brought her, and I took a fancy to her, and I didn't bring, I came by myself, and it was, we sort of hit it off, you know. And then I would, you know, call her once in a while and talk to, you know. And then when I got called, I would ride her once in a while. And she broke off with Jack, which opened the door for me, you know.
How did it?
It shows basically most of the ports that we got into, you know.
So we were talking about that just for the family you were doing with your meeting this gal and so you carried on this courtship while you
So when I got discharged, she was free.
So she waited for you for a couple of years?
I guess like at least 2 years. Yeah.
How was the food and the living quarters and so forth on board?
The living quarters, it was tight.
Yeah.
Okay. The food, it could have been better. It was better than what the Army and Marines were eating, really, because they were always on the back of your mind, you know, especially when in the winter times. That was your thought, those poor bastards out there. So sorry for them.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
But the food was not bad.
Was it the same kind of crew, so you stayed with the same guys, slept in the same
I would say the only thing
years?
There was one change in the whole ship. It was the captain. We had to replace. He was the captain for about 8, 9 months, and then we got another captain. That was it. Other than that, it was 100% the same crew for 2 years.
And how far offshore did you generally stay? I mean, obviously you didn't want shore.
No. Well, you take like Wonson and even Inchon, the Missouri. That was the only Navy ship other than the hospital ship home that we saw. And we would lay off the beach, maybe, I'm assuming, say, a half a mile to a mile. And the Missouri would be out further, maybe 10, 15 miles. And all night long, that thing would just show the beach. And all night long, you know, going up, whistling at these shells going up, you know. Because they could throw these big shells 20, 25 miles, you know. And so they were basically never in harm's way again. They didn't have to worry about planes, subs, or other ships, you know. But we stayed off about a half a mile. You know, you don't want to get too far out, too far in, you know.
Why didn't the Koreans carry on a more aggressive naval battle? Why were they so passive?
North Korea never really had a Navy or an Air Force. No. In fact, the Air Force, some percentage of the air fighting was, we had the Corvette, with the Gullwing, and Briggs, you know, and then we got the jets over there, the Corsairs. That's it. We had,
when you left Korea, what state of development was the war? Was the war over when you guys?
It didn't start peace talks yet. It was still, you know.
What was the speed, top speed of this boat?
Oh, with a good tailwind, 10 knots.
So you swim that to it?
Yeah, well, we went from Japan to Hawaii. We stayed there a couple of days. We had to take on food for the trip to San Diego. It took 30 days.
They couldn't lift it on an aircraft carrier and just...
It took 30 days to get from Hawaii to San Diego.
This was taking it back after the war?
This was coming back.
Yeah.
Well, in 52, the war wasn't over yet.
But I mean, when your service was... Are there newer versions of that now?
Of an LST?
Yeah.
Yeah, but they don't look like the old ones. And any LST sailor don't like them. You know, it's not, doesn't even look near like the original LST.
What was the capacity, as far as you said you carried equipment and then, what complement of people could it pick up?
Oh, well, there were times like, well, the tank deck, it was called, you know, I mean, we had tanks, we had trucks, jeeps, mounds and mounds of supplies, and on one side of the ship was the aft and the starboard side of the boat was for ship's company, and the port side was all transit, okay? And we used to take like rock to the Republic of Korea soldiers, and they didn't know how. You got to remember, Korea then, you know, they didn't even flush toilets were out. And they would go to the bathroom and nobody knew, taught them how to flush. And that was my job. That was the part of it. Mother of God, that was probably worse than anything else. And we were like out for 2 days, and everybody said, "What's that smell?" And we were feeding them, and nobody flushed. It was all over the place. I'm telling you, it was unbelievable. And myself and the crew.
Did you have a kind of a holding tank on the ship to collect this stuff?
No, that went overboard.
Went overboard, yeah. I was going to say, I thought it probably did, but I didn't know.
It was funny though, like we maybe go into full sauna, all sauna, everything seemed like it'd be a sauna at the end of it, and we'd load up with all kinds of supplies and troops, the Army, Marines, and we might be heading off for another port. At night, like I say, on the starboard side, had like 3 or 4 compartments, and guys would come out with, well, with a bayonet, start opening up the crates, you know,
really?
K rations, C rations. Oh, this is good, because there was sometimes you look at something, you walk right by, you know. And I was fortunate because being a pipe fitter, I had the cutting apparatus, and with a piece of heavy gauge metal, I mean, like somewhat of a frying pan, and with the torch, I could fry things.
More of the innovation that you have to be in the service.
You want to live?
That's right.
And when you was on engine room or generator watch, every hour you had a routine. You had to go to the port and starboard shaft alleys to see, you know, there was always water in it, but it didn't, you know, anything going wrong. And you had to go up to the bow and check this. You had various locations you had to check. And one of the main ones was the reefer room, the refrigeration. And they would have slides of beef hanging off and get the old bayonet out, cut some piece off, back to the shop, spot your steak. You learn to survive. Yeah. You open up the K-Rers, they had the chocolate and the beans and the spam and all that, you know. And a lot of powdered stuff, like butter that never melted.
I know, yeah. It's amazing that tastes good.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to survive for another day,
So you could have like 100 people on there beside your crew, or 200?
Oh yeah, we could at least 200 people, no problem. Yeah. Well, a lot of them was sleeping on the truck, so you know, we set up temporary sleeping on the tank deck, you know.
So they'd be out for 2 or 3 days, and then you drop them off.
Drop them off, empty out the whole ship, get another assignment. You know, when you have to swing from the East Coast around Busan up to the West Coast.
How many ships like yours were over?
There were quite a bit. I'd say about 12 to 15.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you see the others?
Oh, yeah.
Did you run into them?
Well, on the beach now, but getting back to this Navy organization, there's a couple of guys that also were in the Korean War. We do talk about certain things. In fact, there's one guy, Bob Morales, the LST he was on, was one next to the one that the miner blew up, and they helped pick up survivors out of that, you know.
So the most chilling kind of, if you're part of the fun, no pun intended, thing you went through was with this Marine group that was in the reservoir.
Yeah. That was the hardest of all, you know. We took some out, Army people out of one stuff, but it wasn't a threatening thing, you know. They just get the beat out of them, and they had to get out of there.
How long had you been in the Navy when this happened, this reservoir?
Oh, that was a couple of days before Christmas in 1950.
So it was early.
Yeah, Thanksgiving in 1950. They were all almost up to the reservoir. I don't know how they got there. Like I said, there was about 15 other T's, and they probably came around one side and dropped them off. But our orders, and plus other ones, is to get them out of there. For Thanksgiving, the mess hall trucks came up there, and they fed them like kings. And it was a day of surrender. All hell broke out.
So So they just fell into a real trap.
They set up a trap. It was about, from what I gathered, 12,000 Marines, 60 to 70,000 North Koreans. They were on both sides of them, and it was like, from what I understand, abduction. And the History Channel is added on there once in a while about the Joseph Frozen. It's unique.
I vaguely heard about that one,
Yeah.
but I don't know. You were mentioning some maps of the Korea that...
Yeah, here is some, this is what I look like at 18. Yeah, but
unfortunately,
this is some of the places that I bounced into around all through here.
yeah, and this is...
That's another street,
Yeah, those are things that... how did all of this experience affect you when you got out of the Navy? How were you different then than if you hadn't gone into the Navy?
Wiser, I guess.
Wiser?
Yeah. I'm more of an adult. I took life very serious.
What you, career-wise, how did it affect you? Did you...
Well, I mean, as far as getting the jobs and things.
I mean, as far as what you chose to do with your life.
Yeah, I've been really fortunate, to be truthful with you. It seems like I've always been in at the right spot at the right time. And I'm classified myself as a middleman type of thing. I'll never be rich, but I'll never be poor.
Yeah.
And things work out that way. It's amazing, you know?
Yeah.
So I buy these lucky sevens, you know, for buck. And I tell you, I've been, since, I guess, 10 years, I don't think I'm a dollar or two behind. I might lose 3 or 4, and I'll get a $5 one, you know? That's great. I'm like a midstream type of person, really. It always seems to work out for me.
And you say you went to work for the telephone company?
I started with Western Electric. Okay, from Western Electric, I went into the AT&T Technologies.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked on mostly Long Island.
Which is different than plumbing.
Well, when I came out here, I was a pipe fitter third class. I went to a couple of places to get jobs as a welder and apply my trade. And I didn't have experience. It was the old experience. You need experience, but nobody knew how to get the experience.
Yeah.
And my aunt, I was at my aunt's house one time, and she said, I was talking to Red. I don't know if you know him, I don't know. He's my cousin passed way beyond. He was saying that Western Electric hired. I said, what is Western Electric? He picked up the phone, and at that time, every phone in the world was made by Western Electric. Okay? Now they're made by everybody. They're hired. Go down to 395 Hudson Street, New York. I went down to 395, filled out an application, took a physical, took a color test because color was most important because of color of wires, and I got the job. And I worked there, and what happened was I did a couple of nice jobs, and I ended up with AT&T Technologies. When I had to invest it, they split everything up, went over to them.
What does that mean, AT&T Technologies?
Well, they didn't know what to call us. They didn't call us completely AT&T personnel. They absorbed us. Sort of Air Technologies down here. We did the same exact job. I was in the store. I did modifications on certain equipment, like when DDD came out, direct distance dialing. We had to modify all the equipment in every building in the United States for this, you know, 1 second timing. Years ago, when they didn't have 1 second timing, especially in the salesman type of a line, they would dial a number, the office, right? And they'd say 7 and hang up, and 7 would get a code, made a good sale, I'm moving on to, you know? Yeah. So now they came along and did 1 second timing, so when you picked up the phone, you had 1 second of free time, and you got the billing. And so all these, every building in the United States had to be modified. So, but I worked mostly in Nassau and Suffolk on Long Island. I was fortunate I didn't have to travel until the later years when they started getting out the personnel.
How is staying in touch with the people that you were in the service with? How does that affect you?
Well, like I say, basically, this one guy, Carlton Fuller, we talk every month for 51 years.
What are you talking about?
I don't know. How's the weather? How's your wife? We just let you know I still think how you feel.
Yeah, that's great.
Leah might have cancer. Oh, God, you know. I pray for you because my wife died from cancer, you know. And the 3 guys that I hung out with, the other 2 guys, actually, Jack Riley and Joe Vedder, the Marine and the Sergeant. One lives in Stony Brook and one just moved. He lives in Nazareth. So we talk, you know. And at Christmas time, I don't send cards, I call people. I rather send out a call out a Christmas card. I'd rather talk a half an hour on the phone.
I think it does give you a sense of what relationships mean to you.
No,
I don't take things for granted.
I compare my life of kids today. It was always a different. Kids today is, you didn't do the things you did because your old man let you know what the hell was going on, you know?
Yeah.
Really. And there was about basically 4 or 5 guys that I could use to call them, but we never got into trouble. No, but, it was, we'd stick ball on Saturday. If you dusted, you know, with your shoes, you would stick ball, football. We went to the bars, but it was never any harm done, you know. We were there for playing shuffleboard or, you know, things like that.
Would you recommend your kids if you had to do over that they go in the Navy?
I would say the Navy or the Air Force more than the Marines and the Army, you know. It's not a way to, it's fine in peacetime, but when you're in like 60 below zero, or up the mud of your ankles and your next meal's coming out of a tin can, no, I'm sorry. I mean, the food on our ship, like I said, I used to fry eggs and steaks and things. The food, you know, if you looked at supper, you know, but you survived. You know, and what you refused, these guys that were chosen frozen would have died for. Well, not really, you know, so.
That's a maturity kind of.
Yeah. Like I say, you get to learn to grow up, you know.
Yeah.
And when I got home, when I got discharged, I got home 2 days before Christmas. And it was about a week later, my mother came up to me and said, okay, Bob, when are you getting a job? And that was it. And I got a job, and the funny thing is, they gave your mother the envelope. She took the money, and out of the envelope, she gave you $20. That was just that money. Yeah. Yeah, but you grow up. If you don't grow up, you miss something, you know. I thank God I came out of a skin hole, you know. I feel the signs of the other people, the armed force people, but it's a learning lesson. And then came the Gulf. Well, it was a war, but then these things that got into now, I wish we could get out because I see more guys coming home in body bags after the war than during the war, you know.
Yeah. You belong to any veterans organization?
I'm the first vice president of all of New York State as far as the Amphibious Association. I've been the vice president for about 3.5 years.
How many people are in that group?
It was about 250, and there's one fellow, Jim Wendling, who got to set up all this. He was interviewed about a year ago. Him and I, we started a Navy organization in our area of Horsens, and it's well, it started at LSD, but there are not too many of them around. Like I said, they say we're losing 1,500 a day. There's basically about 12, 15 ships that are classified as amphibious. So we opened up and we changed it to New York State Southern Tier Chapter Amphibious Association. Now we're getting guys LSDs, LCIs, blah, 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 you know. And all of a sudden, why not make it to all Navy men? So we have, I guess we get a meeting about 45, 48 people.
Great.
And you know why it's come, you know.
Big camaraderie.
And this guy, Jim and I, we run this. And we meet in the Holiday Inn on Route 17 in Westinghouse Road every other month. You know, yeah. And they set an ice out. They treat us like kings. It's $8. But sometimes you have things like stuff for jobs and stuff. You know, that's okay. And I also, so Jim and I started that, and then I run a raft for $50, and I buy a cheap bottle of wine and wrap it up, and people bring in gay gifts, you know. And we usually put about $20, $25, you know, to 50-50. Yeah. And that goes towards our Christmas club, which I'm running in December. The holiday. So he's got, you know, I keep active. And also in the summertime, usually around October, I run a luncheon cruise up at Keokuk Lake, for this local chapter. You know, and I said make all the arrangements for that. And so I keep busy with the service type of thing. You know.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to add to this interview before we?
No, I think the kids of today, you know, I'm talking to my grandson, he just turned 13. He found out I was in Japan. He was amazed that I was in Japan. You know, the kids don't realize what went on, you know. And I think what bothers me the most, really, is, don't take this, this always comes out wrong, and I should bite my tongue, is the Vietnam War, you know. Vietnam War, we lost, in 10 years, we lost 48,000 men, which is, you know, and what did we get out of this? The Korean War was 3.5 years, and we lost approximately 45,000. So Korean War was a hard war. Vietnam was a war. It was a different type of a war.
Yeah.
You know, it was jungled in some parts, you might understand. There was did a lot of Air Force bombing, and they had MiGs, you know, so there was action in the sky. And the Navy did, in one way, play somewhat of a role in it. One of the LSTs is now called the Sphinx, and it's in the river down in Virginia, in mothballs. That was converted to a repair ship for these riverboats that created havoc along these rivers. And they maintained them, you know, supplies, ammunition, repairs, and things like that. You know. So the Navy in Vietnam did play somewhat of a small part. But Korea was the air, but most of it was a ground fight. You know, it was. The winter, you never got warm. Never got warm. My bunk was they fall out type of bunk. You'll see pictures of it. I was the top one, the third one high. And right above where I slept was a ductwork. The blew hot air throughout the ship. You know, air conditioning, everything, which the air conditioning never worked. And I was fortunate of being in a situation where I had all kinds of tools like tin snips, and I cut a hole in, you know, and put a piece of metal there to fill the heat up. And when you get warm,
That's right. You do what you have to.
you do what you have to. You know.
Yeah.
Sorry for the guy after me, but I got one. You know.
Yeah.
You know. I mean, you did everything to survive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that's a healthy kind of maturing experience.
Yeah. And then when we needed supplies, we would tie up to a cargo ship, and we had 2 LCVPs called Landing Craft Personnel. And the coxswain, and I know him very well, we talk once in a while too. If he went from ship to ship, we would make a list of cottons, camels, shaving cream razors, you know. He would go over to a supply ship, and we would get a mail and things like that, and we'd stop at the Guido, that's the candy shop, and things like that. You know? And he always had to have somebody from the engineering department. He couldn't go alone in case there was engine trouble, right? And I was the only one. So you'd hit Breitung, report to LCVP number 2, you know, and we go down and what are we doing today? Well, we're going here, we're going there, we're going here, we're going here. That's great. Yeah. But getting back to Hang Nam, it was unbelievable. The coldest day of the year, with the hospital ship Hope, the one side was filled with garbage cans and infested with flies, all amputees and false spine. You know, there's just losing fingers and feet like crazy.
Yeah.
We got to take them out and dump them. If I ever, when I do meet up to one of these guys, I tell you, I think they're the greatest people in the world.
Yeah.
For what they have to put up with.
Yeah. A lot of sacrifices made.
For what?
Yeah, I know.
And I still think North Korea is still a threat.
I think they probably.
I don't think you'll ever get into these people. You know?
Okay, we'll close now.
Punching an officer or whatever you want to do. They would march these people first to the mess hall, and you would have like 3 or 4 Marines in the front, 45. There'd be like a 50-foot space, and we'd have a group of Marines, I know. Yeah.
We just have
volunteers. How you doing? Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
And after the Marines, you would have about 20 prisoners, you know, They come out in the brig, and another 50 feet, they'd have 3 or 4 Marines. Well, the one thing you never do is get between the Marines and the prisoners. I didn't really, like I said, I was ignorant maybe. And I saw a guy I knew on the other side of the road, and I walked between the first bunch of Marines and the first group of prisoners. They threw me in line, and you take your hat, you put it upside down, and you walk to the brick. And I'm not happy. You know, like I say, what the hell is, you know, to me it was a different world. I was there for a day. Really? Yeah, well, the next day at roll call, I wasn't there. Oh, he's in the break. I had to have an officer come over and get me out. Never know, you know, I didn't know what I keep the Navy.
We'll keep going with that. It's October 30th, 2003. We're at the Chemung County Historical Society in Elmira, New York. The person I'm interviewing is Robert Breitung. Date of birth is 12/21/29. Robert lives at 71 Retirement Drive, Portsmouth, New York. My name is Malley. I'm a volunteer at the Veterans Oral History Project. Robert was in the U.S. Navy from 1948 to 1952. Achieved the rank of Pipe Fitter 3rd Class and served in the Korean Theater. Bob, why did you join the Navy?
Like I was saying before, a very good friend of mine, his name was Hank Frey. For weeks and weeks on, he was asking me to join the Navy Reserves in Breitung, New York. And he painted a really pretty picture, like, oh boy, we get paid for this. We go to meetings every Tuesday night, we get uniforms, and again, we get paid for this. And that also, it was located right on Long Island Sound by the Whitestone Bridge. And they had a small, it was a patrol craft, about 125 feet. And he said, boy, we'd go out on weekends, up and down, you know, the Sound. And come the summertime, we go to 2-week cruises. We were going to have a lot of fun. So after about a month or so, I said, okay, Hank, come on, let's go down. And we joined. All right, and it was fine, and all what he said was true. We went on weekend little jaunts up and down the Long Island Sound, and the first summer we went down to the Bahamas on a 2-week cruise, and boy, it was a wonderful time. And then what happened was in 1950, Korea came, and we were the first ones, one of the first ones called into action. And what it was at that time, not knowing about it, that MacArthur, who was in commanding of the armies, wanted to make this invasion in Inchon because the North Koreans was putting the army and the Marines down south with their backs against the water in Busan, Korea. And what happened was, well, Henry got his notice and I got my notice the same day. We reported to the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and we went through there like a whiz bang because we had our uniforms, all we needed to be medical, you know, checked out, and we were on our way. We were at the Brooklyn Navy Yard for about 5-6 days, and Henry and I, we split. I got on a train, a Super Chief, going to California, and in 3 days I was in Treasure Island. I was there for about a week, and then I was on a transport over to Japan, and that's where I got my ship. It was an LST 898. An LST is an amphibious ship, which stands for a landing ship tank. We took on Marines, and we cycled around from Japan to Busan. We picked up more Marines, a lot of supplies, trucks, tanks, jeeps, and everything. And we came around the west side of Korea up to Inchon, and September 15th was the Inchon invasion. Okay? It wasn't a severe type of invasion like if you look at or hear stories like Normandy. You have to understand one thing. The Korean War was like 90% of a land battle, and the rest was planes. The Navy never really had any naval battles like in World War II, you know, where you had kamikazes, you had submarines, the Japanese Navy, and even in the Europe campaign, you had submarines, and the German had battleships and planes, so you were constantly under pressure during the war. The Korean War was a little bit different, or maybe much more different, because most of my duties were, well, I was a pipe fitter, but the ship's duty was, excuse me, was picking up troops at one harbor, excuse me, and bringing troops and supplies into another harbor, okay? Making sure that the North Koreans weren't going to come back and surprise us. You know, it was like end runs. Our biggest fear, and we didn't realize at first, was mines. A lot of these harbors had mines, and it was just surprising because, you know, the war was really into it that long, and again, that the Koreans didn't have a navy, and we don't know who, you know, we're assuming the Russians or somebody gave them the information, the knowledge, and the equipment to lay these mines. And we found out on some of these harbors that we ended up in, we literally went through minefields and never knew it until one LST blew up and we found out that there was mines. So every time we came, you know, back down, dropping troops off and supplies at various parts of Korea, coming into the harbor, we always had 2 or 3 lookouts up at the bow for mines, and all the guns up forward, the 20s and the 30s and the 40 millimeters, they were always armed in case anything that looked like a mine was shot at, and sometimes there were mines, you know. And we were lucky, and we never hit one, you know. We took, I think the roughest thing that we ever saw was in 1950, was the, well, they call them the Chosen Frozen. I don't know if you ever heard of them, but if you ever talked to a Marine that was in the 1st Division that was there, you're in for a story of a lifetime. I don't know who dropped them off, but they made a march up to the Chosen Reservoir, which was well up in the North Korea. And it was never got so cold. It was so cold. Actually, it was the best to standing still about 5 minutes. The wind, the temperature could be 30, 35 below zero. You would get a wind out of China from Manchuria that bring it down to 60, 70 miles an hour. And Marines always had a motto, like, never leave dead behind. This is the first time in hundreds of years that they had to leave their men behind. You went to bed, you know you're going to wake up. And there was about, from what I gathered, about 12,000 Marines compared to 60,000 North Koreans who had them absolutely surrounded. And they fell into a trap. And our job was to wait at Hang Nam, and it was marching down to Hang Nam, and we was going to pull them out. And they had the Marines battled them, and every time in front of it there was a bridge of any sort of going over rivers, the North Koreans would blow them up, and the Army's engineers had to make temporary bridges to get them out. This happened, well, let me see, Thanksgiving. They ate like kings, and after the day after Thanksgiving it started. And by the time I got down to Hang Nam, you never saw anything like this in your life. We took on Marines that were just literally wiped out, half frozen. We took their dead because what they wanted to take. We took some civilians, and the dead had to be taken out to the hospital ship Hope because they were on a tank deck, stuck like cordwood. I'm telling you, it was the most horrible thing you ever could see. And they were starting to decompose, so we had to get rid of them. We had a nice write-up about the ship and what it did. We was the last ship to leave the beach. And LST works like when it hits the beach, it usually is low tide. And just before, a couple hundred yards before it hits the beach, you gotta realize they're a flat bottom. And a huge, huge anchor at the stern of the ship. And at a certain time, they would drop this anchor and it would dig in, and when the ship would go forward, it would hit the beach, the bow doors would open up, and trucks, men, and everybody would run out. Well, at Hang Nam, it was just the opposite. We hit the beach, basically, sort of like a high tide going into a low tide. And we took civilians, we took all the Marines, we took everything that we could. And with all this weight and the tide going out, we couldn't get off the beach. We were stuck. And you could literally see the North Koreans coming down. Okay? And I think the biggest thing that helped us was the fact that they didn't have like cannons or mortars. It was basically small arms, you know. You would hear a ping now and then. But the biggest lifesaver of all was, in the vicinity was a seagoing tug. And every time, well, what would you do? you put the engine in reverse, you start a winch in the back, and that would pull you towards the anchor, all right? Well, the bottom was more muddy-ish than sand, and instead of we being pulled to the anchor, we were pulling the anchor towards us, and we were hung up on the beach. We got this seagoing tug, and between us trying to get off with our power and the seagoing tug pulling, we made it, but we were the last beach, and the last ship off the beach, and it was close. And I tell you, at the age of 18, 19, boy, you can crack your pants. That was not the roughest thing we had. We also had the same problem with Wonsan. We delivered and eventually took people off there, but that hangman was unbelievable, unbelievable. I think that was the worst of it all, really.
When you were in the reserve first,
Yes.
Did you go through traditional basic training of any kind?
No, it was, I was so Navy ignorant, it was unbelievable. We had meetings every Tuesday night. We'd get there about an hour before time, we'd be outside playing soccer or softball, or, you know, in uniform, and then we'd have a meeting, and they had the various classes, actually. I was like in the engine room type of class, diesel engines. And they had a motor mech, that's what they used to call diesel people. You know, he was a chief, and he would talk about this, the engines and blah, blah, blah. And they would go into a lot of damage control, like when General Quarter signed, you had a station, and how do you treat certain fire. It was interesting, really, you know, but we were there for fun, you know. And nobody took it really that serious, but you did join certain things. So, and they looked, and your background, and like in high school, they went over that, and they found out I went to a vocational high school, and I took a machine shop for 2 years and plumbing for 2 years. So, well, I had a background as a pipe fitter or a mechanic, so they grabbed me fast, you know. And in fact, the first day I got on the ship, it was about 4 in the afternoon, and I tell you, I never knew what an LST would look like or what it stood for, but I kept saying, now this isn't back the Navy, because, you know, you see destroyers, carriers, and battleships, and aircraft carriers. I said, what the hell is this thing, you know? I got aboard it, and the exec officer and I sat down, you know, you signed me a bond, you signed me a locker, a quick tour around the ship, and he says, okay, he says, now, look at his watch, it's about 5 o'clock, he said, get on the chow line, you're going to eat first, and I'll tell you why. He brought to me, so I had something, and we reported to him, he took it down to the tank deck. And the tank deck, well, the LST is about 60 foot wide, and the tank deck is about maybe 50, 48 feet wide, but there's compartments as you walk along the tank deck. One is like the pipe fitter's compartment, that was his, you know, supply room where he worked out of. There was an electrician, you know, that's where they worked out of. And the next compartment we came to was the laundry room. They had a washer and a dryer, but it was never hooked up. And that was my first job, getting the dungarees, get in there, get this thing working. So about 9 o'clock at night, I had everything working. And he says, take 2 days, take a day off, you earned it, you know. Because they were washing, just throwing clothes on a rope overboard, you know, and soaking them in salt water. So that's how I got to know a lot of good guys over there, because they wanted glad to see me, you know. But that was my first assignment, get the wash and dryer working, you know.
Did you get any rank before?
I was like a seaman, you know. That was it. But I made my rank actually in Korea.
Yeah. So before, I guess the only thing I'm trying to get at that carefully is, what was the difference in your relationship with these two people who went through Navy basic training and you who kind of finessed it?
Well, I belong to this organization. It's the New York State Amphibious Association. We have about 230 men, you know, we lose them every day. And I hear stories, and these all, I'm a young guy, believe me, at 73. I'm looking at, or talking to people at like 78, 90, 81, who were basically not drafted, but went into the Navy in World War II, and they all went to like Samson. Okay, Samson wasn't even a big, strong guy, but you know. And they got all that training in boot camp. I never was to boot camp. Yeah, Navy Reserve was my boot camp, you know.
Yeah. So what, on the ship, were you the only pipe fitter?
There was a fellow, when I came then when I was like a seaman, first class, all right, and my boss, he was a tin knocker, he was first class, okay, very nice guy, a picture. He was my boss, but he knew everything about, he actually was a deep sea diver, which he came in handy at one time, and he also knew plumbing. He was an all-around type of guy, but he was a tin knocker by rate. And he would give me my assignments. He taught me how to weld, how to use a torch to cut, you know. And it was very helpful. He helped me along. We got along very good. And when a test was coming up, he gave me a book to read on pipe fitting, you know, what the Navy asked for. And he more or less trained me. And he gave me the, you know, I took the test. No cheating. I sat down at the mess hall table. I got the test in front of me. And he said, okay, Mark, time. He walked away and left me. Came back later on. I was done. And 2 weeks later, he ended my stripes.
So what was your rank versus an entry rank? I mean, how many places up the ladder did you get?
Well, it would be like a sergeant.
A sergeant.
Okay, not tons. But you get like sergeant, master sergeant, and all grades of sergeant, you know.
So usually it's about what you get in 4 years.
Yeah, yeah. And getting back to my buddy Hank Schrade, did, and he was shipped to Virginia, Norfolk, Virginia, stayed there 2 years, and never left the States, and on one pass, like a 30-day weekend, he got married. When I came home, he was married, his wife was pregnant, and I said, my God, you're the guy that talked me into this, and you never left the States. You know, that was the joke of the lifetime, I guess.
Did you stay in touch with him after you got out of the service?
Well, not really. Well, yeah, to an extent. You know, once you're married, blah, blah, blah. You know, got that old gang, that song, that old gang is, you know,
Wedding bells are
ringing up the old gang of mine, yeah. But 2 other really good friends of mine. One was a Marine, Jack Riley, and the other one, Joe Vedder. He was in the Army. And myself, we still keep in touch. In fact, one guy, he was a carbon full of, like when you got a liberty, you went to like enlisted men's club, you know. But he was an electrician for clerks, so he was allowed to go to the petty officer club. That's an upgrade, you know. So he used to lend me his jersey, his blouse. Well, I go and work for him, you know. Oh, electricians trade class, you know. And we, you know, we do our drinking and go hours in there. But when I made mine, I said, here's your old jersey back, I don't need mine. But now I got discharged in 52. This compartment on the tank that was right next to mine, sometimes we worked together, you know, if he needed something mounted, I would weld it on, or something getting down, you know. And we got along like 2 peas in a pod. And to this day, he calls me every other month. I call him every other month.
That's great.
After 50 years, 51 years, we still keep in touch.
That's great.
Yeah. And when I go to the last reunions, I can show you the pictures that, well, in fact, it was mostly because of my son-in-law who worked for Corny. He knew how to fly, all right? And he built up a big stack of people fly miles. And for $50, I was able to fly out to the state of Washington, where I lived and where the reunion was, you know. Right now it's kind of hard financial-wise, you know.
Yeah.
You know. And he don't fly anymore, so, you know. But we keep, on my turn, I call up, you know.
That's great.
Yeah, just a few years.
Well, you left California in 1948.
I left, I guess it was, you mean, you go to Korea? Yeah.
Were you actually in the Korean theater for all 4 years?
Oh, no. Like I said, it was like 2 years in Korea, and about 1.5 years, 2 years with the reservists. Now what happened after, put about 1.5 years, close to 2 years in Korea. So Korea, we went to Japan, we wanted to drive that to get patched up. And from there, we went to San Diego. I got to San Diego, and I was supposed to get discharged in 3 days. So for 3 days, I ran around with all kinds of paperwork, pushing my discharge. You know, how to go to the dentist, how to go here, how to go here.
Were you were on active duty for 4 years?
Well, I don't know if you would call it active duty was Korea, basically. That was a 24-hour day.
Yeah.
You know, but
You were active duty in the Navy for 4 years, or?
Well, 2 years I did, but I don't know if you call the reservist or the armed guard active duty.
Yeah.
Well, I guess so then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the most kind of interesting assignment you had as far as keeping the ship afloat, if you will, while you were over there? I mean, when were you having to be the most ingenious?
The most wanted?
The most wanted, the most innovative?
I think it was at the old stuff to look the same. I think it was Wonson. We were taking on, we dropped off troops and supplies, and it was, late at night, it was dark, somewhere around 7:30, 8 o'clock. And the LST next to us was pulling out. We still was, getting ready to pull out. As it pulled out, it swung, and its anchor, the flukes of the anchor hit the side of our ship, went through the side, and ripped up all the piping. And I was up 24 hours trying to get things back to normal,
What piping specific?
Well, it was like hot water, cold water, it didn't hit any fuel lines, thank God for that.
You didn't take on water?
Yeah, but we were always like fresh water, and we weren't taking we were never in a situation of like harm's way of taking in water and maybe going down.
Yeah.
Thank God for that. And like I said before, we didn't have to worry about airplanes dive bombing us. We didn't have to worry about submarines torpedoing us or some big cruiser or battleship blowing us out of the water. It was altogether different,
Well, did you spend any time at all on other kinds of ships?
No, that was the only one, really. So I spent 3 days on an LSD because we had to go over and get mail and supplies.
Yeah.
And that was the only thing.
What did you do on leave? Did you ever get leave while you were?
Yeah, when we went into Kobe for repairs, we patched up. We had, I guess about a month we had to leave just.
Was that your first leave in the Navy?
My first leave, actually, my first time of finding out what the other side of the world looked like is when I got to Japan to get to the ship. I was in Japan about a week, and they wanted to get rid of us. They didn't need us. They had a point started watches and point started. And yeah, it was quite interesting.
What did you do on leave? I mean, to the extent you were part of it.
Well, I was just going to say, at 18, 19, you don't want this on tape. I tell you too, some people don't believe it. I went to a park and took pictures. But no, there was the bar scene and the carousing, buying souvenirs, and the funniest thing was, basically, New Year, the streets were just shops. They would sell you everything, And the Japanese at that time were very crafted, but they imitated a lot of our stuff, But you could buy cigarette lighters and kimonos and fans and dishes. In fact, I bought a set of Noritake bone china, which is probably one of the nicest ones you can get. I forgot what I paid for it, and I paid for shipping and delivery. My mother never got it. God knows where that ended up, That was probably the biggest joke at supper time. I sold this guy something and he ain't going to get it. But it was, like, wow, this is unbelievable,
Yeah.
After the girls were all over the place, But like I say, it was kind of a bar. In fact, in Kobe, the pictures, there's a picture of the outside. For some reason, we got to know this one family very well, I mean, not, fooling around or, And they would allow us to go in the back of the bar, which was their home, And the shore patrol would come in, and they couldn't come back there. They could go up to the bar, but no further. And we would just sit there and have a lot of fun with the girls, and it was great. It was very interesting, very educational for 18, 19-year-old. Yeah, you could go in like a boy, come out like a man. Yeah, really. We went to Tokyo on a weekend. We went, we did tours, Actually, I would say for myself and most of the majority of the guys that were in any service, if it wasn't for the war, they probably would have never left the States. Really. I went to Hawaii, Japan, Korea. I never had the opportunity, never will have the opportunity to go to these places.
Did you ever go back after the war to any of the places?
No, I never would. No.
Did you ever have a desire to do that?
No, not really. I think, believe it or not, sometimes if you even dream about it, after 50 years, certain things come back.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah. I dreamt sometimes I'm back in the service in the Navy again, really. I wake up, not in a cold sweat. I said, thank God it was a dream, No, Right. The other time I would go back if I meet some of the old cronies. I made very, very nice friends.
How did you keep in touch with your family while you were in the service?
Well, it's just my mother and father. And I wasn't married. And my aunts and uncles, I always got the time to either start, mostly on engine room watch or generator watch. I would sit down.
What's engine room watch?
Well, when you're underway, you have to take certain readings every hour.
Oh, really?
For pressures or this and that, fuel consumption, and how many RPMs. And then you had to stand by the announcinator, which was telegraph between the bridge and the engine room. And that was, you were kept pretty busy there, and you're always wiping something down, and then it'd be clean. When you came down the engine room, you went into the rig, start there, and then you had a big chart, you had to go around. It took about 15, 16 readings, But the generator watch was just making sure the generators would work to give the ship electricity, and that was it, so that's when I started most of my writing, I met this girl. I would write her a couple of times a week, and she ended up being my wife. And my aunts and uncles, I would write I had two aunts that lived in the same house. And I'd say, Aunt Emily, you're done with this to Aunt Francis. That's the Lord, really? Yeah. It was a two-family house, apartment house. And I said, when you're done with this, please pass it down to Aunt Mary or Aunt Mary.
Did they keep any of the stuff that you sent, or did you keep copies of letters?
No, you don't think of those things, really. No. I didn't get too much letter from my aunts and uncles. I would write mostly my mother and father, and I would get a lot of mail back from them and packages and things like that.
Did you ever get home on leave, or were you away from
Yes, I got home on leave once. Yes.
How was that? How did you feel about that experience?
It's funny when you change your life so, I couldn't sit still, to be truthful with you, And one of my friends, Joe Vetter, and I, we used to hang out in a bar called Jack Shay's, and they had a game called shuffleboard. Shuffleboard in them days that was big. And we got to the point where we was, always challenging somebody, and you would hold the shuffleboard king position until somebody eliminated you. And we held it for probably one of the longest times. And you go up there, and nothing's the same. Your other friends are in the Army. Joe Vetter was in the Army in Korea. Jack Riley was in the Marines. He was in Korea, Kenny Joe went into the paratroopers. I was in the Navy, and he was in the Navy in Virginia. Almost, yeah. So we got home in a way you couldn't wait to get back, but it's fun. It's funny feeling,
What? How many people were on the ship?
We had about, I'd say about 5 officers and about 125 crew.
Did you stay with the same crew during the whole time over there?
Yeah, and if you look at the pictures, you would never think he was in the Navy because we wore Marine clothes, Army clothes.
Yeah.
The captain of some of these ships, like an aircraft carrier, battleship, or crew, a big ship, really, I'm talking Navy ships. You go down the engine room in your whites, We went down the engine room with dungarees and U.S. Army or Marine. We never wore.
Was it kind of an informal relationship between officers and enlisted?
No, you treated your officers with respect.
Yeah.
But they weren't, down on you.
Yeah. Did you have a regular regimen of activities, or did you have to get up at 5?
Well, you had your watches.
Yeah. But you didn't have a kind of an Army scenario as far as...
No. You had to get up at a certain time.
Yeah.
Then the first thing would be sick call. All right. Then after sick call, you would have breakfast, and then you went on your daily. Then you mustered another tank deck, and from there you went on your daily.
Did they have a chaplain on board?
No. Well, it was Christmas. We had a chaplain. He would go from ship to ship, and he would hear confessions, and we have a mass on the tank deck.
Yeah. Same ship for the whole time, or did you change?
No, I was on the same ship all the time.
What happened to the ship after you?
I don't know. According to here, it tells you the history of it and where it went. I think it went to Taiwan or somewhere. Probably a banana boat. It's still afloat. it's an experience. Now this girl that I was riding to, Gloria, became my wife. I got home, I started to date her. And she was going out with this guy, Jack Riley, who was a Marine, and she didn't care for him, and she started going out with me. And I remember, like, you know, it was strange. I really not got into the dating scene before going into the service, you know, not at 16, 17, and 18. And now I went through this whole change of life, basically, and now I'm with a girl. I really didn't know how to act too well, you know, but we used to go over to 42nd Street a lot, taking the Broadway shows, Louis Prima and Healy Smith, you know. You mentioned these people today, they look at you like you had two heads.
I probably still have records.
Yeah, and when I was on leave, I dated her, and I got discharged. I continued dating. We got married.
She from the same school that you?
No. I lived in a place called Glendale. She lived in Brooklyn on Knickerbocker Avenue, you know. Now, we come from two different backgrounds. I mean, she was Catholic, so was I. But, no, I mean, her lifestyle was different than mine, you know.
How did you meet her?
I met her at a picnic. This friend, Jack Riley, who was in the Marines, and I still talk to him, he brought her, and I took a fancy to her, and I didn't bring, I came by myself, and it was, we sort of hit it off, you know. And then I would, you know, call her once in a while and talk to her, you know. And then when I got called, I would ride her once in a while. And she broke off with Jack, which opened the door for me, you know.
How did it?
I have a map of Korean that shows basically most of the ports that we got into, you know.
So we were talking about that, just for the continuity, we were talking about your meeting this gal, and so you carried on this courtship while you
So I got discharged. She was free.
So she waited for you for a couple of years?
I guess like at least 2 years. Yeah.
How was the food and the living quarters and so forth on board?
The living quarters, it was tight.
Yeah.
Okay. The food, it could have been better. It was better than what the Army and Marines were eating, really, because they were always on the back of your mind, you know, especially when in the winter times. That was your thought, those poor bastards out there, you know, so sorry for them.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
But the food was not bad.
Was it the same kind of crew, so you stayed with the same guys, slept in the same
I would
house
say the only
for a
thing
couple of
is,
years?
there was one change in the whole ship. It was the captain. We had to replace him. He was the captain for about 8, 9 months, and then we got another captain. That was, other than that, it was 100% the same crew for 2 years.
And how far offshore did you generally stay? I mean, obviously you didn't want shore.
No. Well, you take like Wonson and even Inchon, the Missouri. That was the only Navy ship other than the hospital ship home that we saw. And we would lay off the beach, maybe, I'm assuming, say, a half a mile to a mile. And the Missouri would be out further, maybe 10, 15 miles. And all night long, that thing would just shell the beach. And all night long, you know, going up, whistling and these shells going over, you know. Because they could throw these big shells, 20, 25 miles, you know. And so they were basically never in harm's way again. They didn't have to worry about planes, subs, or other ships, you know. But we stayed off about a half a mile. You know, you don't want to get too far out, too far in, you know.
Why did the Koreans carry on a more aggressive naval battle? Why were they so fast?
North Korea, Korea never really had a Navy or an Air Force. No. In fact, the Air Force, some percentage of the air fighting was, we had the Corvette with the gull wing, and Briggs, you know, and then we got the jets over there, the Corsairs. That's what we had.
When you left Korea, what state of development was the war? Was the war over when you guys?
They didn't start peace talks yet. It was still, you know.
What was the speed, top speed of this boat?
Oh, with a good tailwind, 10 knots.
You swim that to it.
Yeah, well, we went from Japan to Hawaii. We stayed there a couple of days. We had to take on food for the trip to San Diego. It took 30 days.
So
up the,
They couldn't lift it on an aircraft carrier and just...
got to Haiti days to get from Hawaii to San Diego.
This was taking it back after the war.
This was coming back.
Yeah.
Well, in 52, the war wasn't over yet.
But I mean, when your service was... are there newer versions of that now? Or?
Of an LST?
Yeah.
Yeah, but they don't look like the old ones. And any LST sailor don't like them. You know, it's not, doesn't even look near like the original LST.
What was the capacity as far as you said you carried equipment and then what complement of people could have picked up?
Oh, well, there were times like, the tank deck, it was called, you know, I mean, we had tanks, we had trucks, jeeps, mounds and mounds of supplies, and on one side of the ship was the aft and the starboard side of the boat was for ship's company, and the port side was all transit, okay? And we used to take like rock to the Republic of Korea soldiers, and they didn't know how, you gotta remember Korea then, you know, they didn't even, flush toilets were out, and they would go to the bathroom and nobody knew, taught them how to flush, and that was my job. That was the pipe that mother of God. That was probably worse than anything else. And we were like out for 2 days, and everybody said, "What's that smell?" And we were feeding them, and nobody flushed. It was all over the place. I'm telling you, it was unbelievable. And myself and the crew.
Did you have a kind of a holding tank on the ship to collect this stuff?
No, that went overboard.
Went overboard. Yeah, I was going to say it. I thought it probably did, but I didn't know.
It was funny though. Like we maybe go into Busan, all salmonies. Everything seemed like it'd be a sound at the end of it. And we'd load up with all kinds of supplies and troops, Army, Marines. And we might be heading off for another port. At night, like I say, on the starboard side, had like 3 or 4 compartments, and guys would come out with, with a bayonet, start opening up the crates, you know, or like K rations, C rations. Oh, this is good because there were sometimes you look at something you walk right by, you know. And I was fortunate because being a pipe fitter, I had the cutting apparatus and with a piece of heavy gauge metal, I mean like somewhat of a frying pan, and with the torch, I could fry things.
More of the innovation after being in the service.
You want to live?
That's right.
And when you was on engine room or generator watch, every hour you had a routine. You had to go to the port and starboard shaft alleys to see, you know, there was always water in it, but it didn't, you know, anything going wrong. And you had to go up to the bow and check this. You had various locations you had to check. And one of the main ones was the reefer room, the refrigeration. And they would have slides of beef hanging off and get the old bayonet out, cut some piece off, back to the shop, fry the steak. You learn to survive. Yeah. You open up the K-Rers, they had the chocolate and the beans and the spam and all that, you know. And a lot of powdered stuff. My butter had never melted.
I know, yeah. It's amazing what tastes good.
Yeah. And if you want to survive for another day,
So you could have 100 people on there beside your crew, or 200?
Oh, yeah, we could at least 200 people, no problem. Yeah. Well, a lot of them would sleep on the truck, so, you know, we set up temporary sleeping on the tank deck, you know.
So they'd be out for 2 or 3 days, and then you drop them off.
Drop them off, empty out the whole ship, get another assignment. You know, when you have to swing from the East Coast around Busan up to the West Coast.
How many ships like yours were over?
There were quite a bit. I'd say about 12 to 15.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you see the others?
Oh, yeah.
Did you run into them?
Well, on the beach now, but getting back to this Navy organization, there's a couple of guys that also were in the Korean War. We do talk about certain things. In fact, there's one guy, Bob Morales, the LST he was on was one next to the one that the miner blew up, and they helped pick up survivors out of it, you know.
So the most chilling kind of, if you're part of the fun, no pun intended, thing you went through was with this Marine group that was in the reservoir.
Yeah. That was the hardest of all, you know. We took some out, Army people out of launch up, but it wasn't a threatening thing, you know. They just get the beat out of them, and they had to get out of there.
How long had you been in the Navy when this happened, this reservoir show?
Oh, that was a couple of days before Christmas in 1950.
So it was early
Yeah,
in your career.
Thanksgiving in 1950, they were all almost up to the reservoir. I don't know how they got there. Like I said, there was about 15 other teams, and they probably came around one side and dropped them off. But our orders, and plus other ones, is to get them out of there. For Thanksgiving, the mess hall trucks came up there, and they fed them like kings. And it was a day or two later, all hell broke out.
So they just fell into a real trap.
They set up a trap. It was about, from what I gathered, 12,000 Marines, 60 to 70,000 North Koreans. They were on both sides of them, and it was like, from what I understand, abduction. And the History Channel is added on there once in a while about the Joseph Frozen. It's unique.
I've vaguely heard about that one, but I don't know.
Yeah.
You were mentioning some maps of the Korea that...
There is some, this is what I look like at 18. Yeah, but
unfortunately,
this is some of the places that I bounced into around all through here.
yeah,
That's another street,
yeah, those are things that... how did all of this experience affect you when you got out of the Navy? How were you affected then that if you hadn't gone into the Navy?
Wiser, I guess.
Wiser?
I'm more of an adult. I took life very serious.
What you, career-wise, how did it affect you? Did you...
I mean, as far as getting the jobs and things?
I mean, as far as what you chose to do with your life.
I've been very fortunate, to be truthful with you. It seems like I've always been in at the right spot at the right time. And I'm classified myself as a middleman type of thing. I'll never be rich, but I'll never be poor.
Yeah.
And things work out that way. It's amazing,
Yeah.
So I buy these lucky sevens, for a buck. And I tell you, I've been, since, I guess, 10 years, I don't think I'm a dollar or two behind. I might lose 3 or 4, and I'll get a $5 one, That's great. I'm like a midstream type of person, really. It always seems to work out for me.
And you say you went to work for the telephone company?
I started with Western Electric. Okay, from Western Electric, I went into AT&T Technologies.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked on mostly Long Island.
Which is different than plumbing, but...
Well, when I came out here, I was a pipe fitter third class. I went to a couple of places to get jobs as a welder and apply my trade. And I didn't have experience. It was the old experience. You need experience, but nobody would hire to get the experience.
Yeah.
And my aunt, I was at my aunt's house one time, and she said, I was talking to Red. I don't know if you know him. I don't know. He's my cousin passed way beyond. He was saying that Western Electric hired him. I said, what is Western Electric? He picked up the phone, and at that time, every phone in the world was made by Western Electric. Okay? Not made by everybody. They're hired. Go down to 395 Hudson Street, New York. I went down to 395, filled out an application, took a physical, took a color test because color was most important because of color of wires, and I got the job. And I worked there, and what happened was I did a couple of nice jobs, and I ended up with AT&T Technologies. When I had to divest it, they split everything up, went over to them.
What does that mean, AT&T Technologies?
Well, they didn't know what to call us. They didn't call us completely AT&T personnel. They absorbed us. I sort of had a technology stuff. We did the same exact job. I was in the store. I did modifications on certain equipment, like when DDD came out, direct distance dialing. We had to modify all the equipment in every building in the United States for this, or 1 second time. Years ago, when they didn't have 1 second time, and especially in the salesman type of a line, they would dial a number in the office, right? And they'd say 7 and hang up, and 7 would up a code, made a good sale, I'm moving on to, So now they came along and did 1 second time, and so when you picked up the phone, you had 1 second of free time, and then you got the billing. And so every building in the United States had to be modified. So, but I worked mostly in Nassau and Suffolk on Long Island. I was fortunate I didn't have to travel until the later years when they started getting out the personnel.
How is staying in touch with the people that you were in the service with? How does that affect you?
Well, like I say, basically, this one guy, Carlton Fuller, we talk every month for 51 years.
What are you talking about?
I don't know. How's the weather? How's your wife? We just let you know I still think how you feel.
That's great.
Leah might have cancer. Oh God, I pray for you because my wife died from cancer. And the three guys that I hung out with, the other two guys, actually, Jack Riley and Joe Vedder, the Marine and the Sergeant. One lives in Stony Brook and one just moved. He lives in Massillon. So we talk, And like Christmas time, I don't send cards, I call people. I rather send out a Christmas card. I'd rather talk a half an hour on the phone.
I think it does give you a sense of what relationships mean to you.
No,
I don't take things for granted.
I compare my life of kids today. It was always a bit different. Kids today you didn't do the things you did because your old man let you know what the hell was going on, really. And there was about basically 4 or 5 guys that I used to call them, that we never got into trouble. No, it was, we'd stick ball on Saturday, if you dusted, with your shoes, you would stick ball, football. We went to the bars, but it was never any harm done, We were there for playing shuffleboard or, things like that.
Would you recommend to your kids if you had to do over that they go in the Navy?
I would say the Navy or the Air Force more than the Marines and the Army, It's kind of way it's fine in peacetime, but when you're in like 60 below zero, or up the mud of your ankles and your next meal's coming out of a tin can, no, I'm sorry. I mean, the food on our ship, like I said, I used to fry eggs and steaks and things. The food, if you looked at supper, but you survived. And what you refused, these guys that were chosen frozen would have died for. So
that's a maturity kind of.
Like I say, you get to learn to grow up, And when I got home, when I got discharged, I got home 2 days before Christmas. And it was about a week later, my mother came up to me and said, okay, Bob, when are you getting a job? And that was it. And I got a job, and the funny thing is, they gave your mother the envelope. She took the money, and out of the envelope, she gave you $20. That was just that money.
The envelope, and you asked for 21.
But you grow up. If you don't grow up, you miss something, I thank God I came out of a skin hole, I feel sorry for the other people, armed force people, but it's a learning lesson. And then came the Gulf. Well, it was a war, but then the thing we got into now, I wish we could get out because I see more guys coming home in body bags after the war than during the war,
You belong to any veterans organization?
I'm the first vice president of all of New York State as far as the Amphibious Association. I've been the vice president for about 3.5 years.
How many people are in that group?
It was about 250, and there's one fellow, Jim Wendling, who got to set up all this. He was interviewed about a year ago. Him and I, we started a Navy organization in our area of Horsens, and it's it started at LSP, but not too many of them around. Like I said, they say we're losing 1,500 a day. There's basically about 12, 15 ships that are classified as amphibious. So we opened up and we changed it to New York State Southern Tier Chapter Amphibious Association. Now we're getting guys LSDs, LCIs, blah, 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 And all of a sudden, why not make it to all Navy men? So we have, I guess we get a meeting about 45, 48 people.
Great.
And your wives come,
Big camaraderie.
And this guy, Jim and I, we run this. And we meet in the Holiday Inn on Route 17 in Westinghouse Road every other month, And they set an ice out. They treat us like pigs. It's $8. But sometimes you have things like stuff for jobs and issues, cakes, That's okay. And I also, so Jim and I started that, and then I run a raft for $50, and I buy a cheap bottle of wine, wrap it up, and people bring in gay gifts, And we usually get about $20, $25, to 50-50. And that goes towards our Christmas club, which I'm running. in December after the holiday. So he's got, I keep active. And also in the summertime, usually around October, I run a luncheon cruise up at Keokuk Lake for this local chapter. And I said, make all the arrangements for that. And so I keep busy with the service type of thing,
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to add to this interview before we?
No, I think the kids of today, talking to my grandson, he just turned 13. He found out I was in Japan. He was amazed that I was in Japan. The kids don't realize what went on, And I think what bothers me the most, really, is, don't take this. This always comes out wrong, and I should bite my tongue, is the Vietnam War, Vietnam War, we lost, in 10 years, we lost 48,000 men, which is, and what did we get out of this? The Korean War was 3.5 years, and we lost approximately 45,000. So Korean War was a hard war. Vietnam was a war. It was a different type of a war. It was jungled in some parts, from what I understand. There was did a lot of Air Force bombing, and they had MiGs, so there was action in the sky. And the Navy did, in one way, play somewhat of a role in it. One of the LSTs is now called the Sphinx, and it's in the river down in Virginia, in mothballs. That was converted to a repair ship for these riverboats that created havoc along these rivers, and they maintained them, supplies, ammunition, repairs, and things like that. So the Navy in Vietnam did play somewhat of a small part, but Korea was the air, but most of it was a ground fight. It was. The winter, it never got warm. Never got warm. My bunk was they fall out type of bunk. You'll see pictures of it. I was the top one, the fragrant high. And right above where I slept was a ductwork that blew hot air throughout the ship. Air conditioning, everything, which the air conditioning never worked. And I was fortunate of being in a situation where I had all kinds of tools like tinsmiths, and I cut a hole in it, and put a piece of metal there to filter the heat out. When you get warm, that's right. You do what you have to. You do what you have to. Sorry for the guy after me, but I got hard, And you did everything to survive.
And then that's a healthy kind of maturing experience.
And then when we needed supplies, we would tie up to a cargo ship, and we had 2 LCVPs called Landing Craft Personnel. And the coxswain, and I know him very well, we talk once in a while too. Even if he went from ship to ship, we would make a list of cottons, camels, shaving cream razors, he would go over to a supply ship, and we would get a mail and things like that, and we'd stop at the Guidon, that's the candy shop, and things like that. And he always had to have somebody from the engineering department. He couldn't go alone in case there was engine trouble, right? And I was the only one. So you'd hit Breitung, report to LCVP number 2, and we go down and what are we doing today? Well, we're going here, we're going there, we're going here, we're going here. That's great. But getting back to that Hung Nam, it was unbelievable. The coldest day of the year at the hospital ship home, the one side was filled with garbage cans and infested with flies, all of these false spikes. There's just losing fingers and feet like crazy. And you got to take them out and dump them. When I do meet up to one of these guys, I tell you, I think they're the greatest people in the world. For what they have to put up with. A lot of sacrifices made. For what? I know. And I still think North Korea is still a threat. I think they've probably. I don't think you'll ever get into these people. Okay, we'll close now. Punching an officer or whatever you want to do. They would march these people first to the mess hall, and you would have like 3 or 4 Marines in the front, 45. There'd be like a 50-foot space, and we'd have a group of Marines, I know. We just have volunteers. How you doing? Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
And after Marines, you would have about 20 prisoners, you know, they come out of the brig, and then another 50 feet would have 3 or 4 Marines. Well, the one thing you never do is get between the Marines and the prisoners. I didn't really, like I said, I was ignorant maybe. And I saw a guy I knew on the other side of the road, and I walked between the first bunch of Marines and the first group of prisoners. They threw me in line, and you'd take your hat, you put it upside down, and you went to the brig. And I'm not happy. You know, like I say, what the hell is, you know, to me it was a different world. I was there for a day. Really? Yeah, well, the next day at roll call, I wasn't there. Oh, he's in the brig. I had to have an officer come over and get me out. Never know, you know, I didn't know what Hank did in the Navy.
We'll keep going with that.